Hi, everyone. It is Mrs. Brown here. I hope you're having a wonderful morning. And I am so excited today because I have an amazing guest to invite to our conversation today. I know if you've been around here for a while, you know that I have shared that I have two children of my own who have different struggles, and one in particular who has expressive language delay. So if you, like me, are on your homeschooling journey or just parenting journey in general, and you have a student you may suspect needs extra support, or a student who is getting support, but you want to know how to better support them on their journey of, having speech or language delays. Today is the day you want to send this link to someone, invite someone, because you can ask your questions in real time to my special guest, and her name is Angela C. Williams. So I'm going to go ahead and bring her to the screen. Angela, welcome today. I'm so glad that you are here to join us to give us some encouragement and some guidance.
Good morning. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Miss Brown.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm going to go ahead and read a little bit of Angela's bio just so you know who is here and who is here to give us guidance. Angela C. Williams brings over 3 decades of experience as a speech language pathologist to empower speech and language services. She has extensive experience serving children of all ages in the public schools and outpatient clinics, as well as private practice settings. She's an ASHA certified speech and language pathologist. And one thing I want to share from her bio that I just love is it says, while growing up with neighborhood friends who experienced communication challenges, she learned at a young age the impact communication has on social, emotional, and academic skills. Since childhood, Angela has been seeking ways to elevate individuals through communication. Thank you so much, Angela. I know that I cannot share all that 3 decades has covered in these 2 paragraphs I read. So is there anything else you'd like to share with us about your experience and kind of what brought you to this particular skill and this particular field of support?
Well, you did mention my childhood, and I will say that my childhood definitely had a big impact on my choice of career. Um, I think you mentioned also in my on my website, I talk about my interactions with my peers, my childhood peers. Through those interactions, I was able to see my friends as individuals despite their disabilities. I didn't focus on the part of them that was disabling. I was able to see just how intelligent, witty, talented, and fun they were despite them. Um, I was also in awe at how they persevered despite their disabilities. And I was happy to actually refer to them as my family and friends because I had a brother. I have a brother that is visually impaired. I had two neighbors across the street. One was deaf, and another had speech sound disorders. And I had another family friend who had cerebral palsy. And I interacted with these friends daily, so I learned a lot from them as we played and interacted. Um, I think one of the biggest impacts on my career was when the friend that had speech sound disorders, I hadn't seen him in like a year because we had moved. When I saw him a year later, I could understand him a lot better. And I just remember thinking to myself, wow, how did that happen? And I really thought whoever had a role in his speech improvement, I wanted to, you know, find out more about that and
Mhm.
possibly, pursue that career. And that was early on. That was like in elementary school.
Mhm.
Um, so I think while practicing, moving fast forward, um, as I went through education, elementary school, high school, middle school, high school, I kind of just knew that I wanted to pursue a career in speech language pathology, even though many people thought I'd go into medicine. But I
Mhm.
ended up going on ahead, following my passion and becoming a speech language pathologist. And while practicing as a speech language pathologist, my primary focus has always been service, and faithfulness. So,
Mm.
and that's the direction I, I, that's just where I want to keep the focus of my practice.
Yeah, very nice. Thank you so much for sharing kind of not just the what you do, but the why you do what you do. I think that's so important. Again, personally speaking, I have navigated the whole IEP 504 waters with two of my kids and having people along the way who just cared for us, cared for me, because that's something it was very new to me. I was very new to trying to support my students when I was starting to notice, and they were starting to notice that there was something that was keeping them from moving forward academically. And so I appreciate your why behind your what. So let me go here and ask this first question. What is normal development or typical development, and when should a parent be concerned? That for me is a question I'd love for you to answer, so that for
Mhm.
those who watch or who will watch the replay, how do we know when we should be concerned and when it's just like, oh, they just need more time to develop in this area.
Okay. Well, before we talk about what is normal language development, first we need to think about the fact that the ultimate goal is to become an effective communicator. And what is communication? So,
Mhm.
communication is the transfer of a message between a sender and receiver, but that implies that the message was received. So, if the message was not received, communication did not occur. So, that's uh, kind of what we need to think about when we are addressing communication. And as a speech language pathologist, when we speak of communication, we tend to look at it as, um, let's see, articulation or
Mhm.
speech, which involves articulation, fluency, which is stuttering, and voice. And then we tend to look at receptive language skills, which is comprehension, expressive language skills, which could be spoken and written language, and also pragmatics or social communication skills. And in those areas, there's different components. So while we're looking at your expressive language and your receptive language, we are looking at the form, how well a child can understand rules that govern form and structure, how will they use those rules that govern uh, structure and different changes in word structure and sentence structure. And then we're also looking at content. Do they understand the importance of content in the meaning of the semantics and meanings of words? Do they understand the importance of having a meaning in their spoken sentences? So, are they using content? Do they understand different levels of content? And then, lastly, we're looking at how a student uses their language, or do they understand how we can manipulate language and use language for different purposes? So these are all the things that we're looking at as speech language pathologists as we look at the language development of a particular child. So I'm going to go through the developmental profile, and what
Okay.
we'll do first is let's start with birth. We're going to look at birth to age 1. Okay, so from birth to 1, when you bring that baby home, you're so happy to have them home, and hopefully they're sleeping a little for you. You know,
Hopefully.
so, but one of the things you should look for when you bring that infant home is, do they have a startle response? Do they startle to the
Mhm.
when there is noise or sudden sound in the area? And
Mhm.
so that's something you want to make sure that they have, so that we make sure that their hearing is intact. Are they localizing to the source of sound as they mature and get older? If they hear uh, someone coming, or they hear a toy, will they turn? Then as they get older, do they listen to your voice? And can they make a distinction between the voice of daddy versus the voice of mommy? Do they respond to their name? Or if you say, hi, sweet boy, do they respond? And then you start looking at the cooing and the babbling. They'll make all sorts of, sweet little sounds. And then that's when that turn taking should come into play. You're hearing the cooing and the babbling, and then you say something, and there should be a pause. Then there should be more cooing and babbling taking place. So those are all the things you should be looking for from birth to one. And then you should see if their cries mean something. When they're crying, do they want to be comforted? Are they hungry? And most parents know that they can make distinction between their cries, and then do they giggle when they're having fun and you're playing games. So those are really important things you need to look at in that stage.
You're taking me down memory lane. My babies are 17, 16, 15, and 13. But I'm like, I remember that when it was like, okay, they cried because they were hungry. There was a cry because they were asleep. They were sleepy, and a cry because they needed me to change them. So
Right.
yeah, you're taking me down memory lane. And if you're looking or watching this live, be sure to ask your questions, because again, Angela has a wealth of knowledge. So make sure you drop your questions inside of either the YouTube or the Facebook page, wherever you're watching from, so I can get your questions answered live and send them to Angela to answer. All right. So you're talking about birth to one.
Okay. And so now moving on to like 1 to 2, and keep in mind that these aren't exact. There may be some children that might lag behind, and some may be a little accelerated. So these, this profile isn't exact, but this is kind of the range. You should be looking for these, benchmarks. So from 1 to 2, you might notice different sounds coming in at your child's repertoire. You might hear those are sounds that in their babbling, you might hear pa 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 pa. That those sounds. Mama, that's mama. It's usually one of the sounds that come in first. So we're not sure if they're actually saying mama. They may be going mama, and we're like, oh, they said mama, but that's great. So then we look at their receptive language, their hearing and understanding, and how it's developing. And so between 1 and 2, they should be pointing to a few of their body parts. They should be following at least one part directions, like give me the ball, kiss the baby if you have a doll or something. And they should respond to simple questions like, who's that? Who's that? They listen to simple stories, songs, and rhymes, and they're pointing to pictures and books when you name them, which that's really important. Have books, share books with your children that are vibrant, and, go through the book with them and pointing and looking at pictures. So that all helps in developing comprehension skills, receptive language. So then we look at expressive language, which is their ability to speak, making their wants and needs known. They begin to use lots of new words, and sometimes you may not understand all of them, but a lot of them become clearer as time goes on. So, and like I mentioned before, you want to start to name pictures in books, because this child, they're paying attention to you, they're paying attention to how you say words. And I would say face-to-face contact is really important at this time. So if you can position yourself in front of the child a lot so they can see what you're doing, because they are really picking up on how you're saying certain words and how you're labeling different objects in their environment. They begin to ask questions like, what's that? And where's the kitty? Or where's kitty? It may not be where's the kitty, but where's the kitty?
Is this a 1 to 2 or 3 to, or is this a 1 to 2 or 2 to 3?
This is 1 to 2 still. They should start, even if it's one word, they might say that, where's the kitty? And they should probably, they should be pointing, towards what they're talking about. That joint attention should come in to get you engaged in a conversation, to let you know that, hey, I'm interested in this. Can we talk about this? Okay. And so that's what you want to look for too. So expressively, but also look receptively and pragmatically if they're using a point, if they're leaning towards or reaching towards, because that's something you want to make sure that they're developing as well.
Okay.
Now, as we move on to 2 to 3, more sounds come in. Your child should be saying words that have k, g, f, t, d, n, and y, like
Mhm.
cookie. They may say
Mhm.
tootsie for cookie. That's perfectly developmentally fine. That
Mhm.
that does happen. So, but they should practice. It's really sound play. So as they play with different sounds, they realize that they're experimenting with different blowing sounds like and that.
Mhm.
So you'll see a lot more sounds coming in their repertoire. So, and as far as comprehension, they should begin to understand different descriptors like little and big, and location like up and down. And as a result of that, they should be able to follow directions like put something on, sit down, put that down, so they're learning new vocabulary. So they should be able to follow directions with that vocabulary in it. And expressively in the 2 to 3 year old children, um, they they should pretty much have words to express almost anything. Okay,
Mhm.
they can talk about things that are not in the room. They can talk
Okay.
about daddy or ball or book. I want book, and the book may not be right there, but they can tell you I want the book, and that they can direct. They're directing someone to get something or directing your attention about something that's not even present. They should be using 2 or 3 words to talk about and ask for things. And believe it or not, they start asking why at that point. So that
Mhm.
might be why a whole lot. Why? And sometimes
All the time.
just to hear you talk. That's it. They love hearing you talk. So
So in each stage, there's receptive language and expressive language development that as parents we should be looking for these markers, both
right.
receptively and express. Okay, okay,
Mhm. And
yeah.
so, and the the words, the vocabulary should be increasing, and you should
Mhm.
become concerned if you may see that your child is not labeling things that you think they should be. And I know that we're going to talk about that later, but they should be able to label things in their immediate environment, things that are part of a morning routine. So yes, they start developing that vocabulary. They start approaching adult type structures in their sentences. So the sentence length
Mhm.
should gradually increase, and should look more like adult structures. So, and so now I think we are on 3 to 4, 3 to 4.
And you're welcome to share, like as you're sharing, you can certainly share, because I know we're going to talk about what to look for, but if you want to share it as you're talking about each level, like
Mm-hmm.
when should we be concerned and when is it give it more time if it's
Okay.
better to share kind of level wise. So feel
Okay.
free to do that.
And I just want to emphasize, because now I'm going to 3 to 4 at that 2 year age. If you have a child has limited expressive vocabulary, they don't give you that turn taking back and forth when um, you're speaking, and you don't have that joint attention where they seem disinterested in things in the environment, and they really don't really try to direct your attention to anything. Or maybe if they may be crying and not really be able to express why, and you're just having
Mhm.
trouble figuring out what is going on.
Mhm.
That's a flag right there. So you should really seek help from your primary care physician, developmental pediatrician, speech language pathologist right at that point.
Okay.
Okay. So I just felt that that's really important. At around
Mhm.
2, if you've got concerns, that I'd say your pediatrician will say, oh, let's wait till they're 2. But even if you get an inkling before 2 that, he or she is just not responding. They're just not
Mhm.
babbling or I don't hear them playing with sounds that much.
Mhm.
You know in your gut when you need to seek help from a specialist.
Okay.
So as we look at 3 to 4, more speech sounds are coming in. That's when they start developing those more difficult sounds like sh,
Mhm.
sh. Some may distort them. They may not be perfect, but they're approximating or coming close to what is seen as normal. Then, as far as comprehension, um, they they should respond when you call them from another room. They should be able to stop what they're doing and respond. And they understand words for colors. They're starting to understand words for shapes, and may start using those as well. And expressive language, they're talking. They're answering simple who, what, when, where questions. They're even starting to understand rhyming, like nursery rhymes. They're understanding that, oh, those words kind of sound alike. All of that is starting to come in. You'll see the pronoun usage come in and change. It may change from me got, to I. Or you'll see them saying her or him did, which is developmentally appropriate, but hopefully eventually, they'll start using he, she. So they're practicing all of that. And remember, you are the model. You're the model. So when you hear that, just in your interaction, model the correct word that you would like to see them use. And they're starting to ask more questions, and they're putting 4 or more words together at this time. And at this point, they're talking about what happened during the day and maybe what they want to happen tomorrow. And they're using, they're starting to tell you little stories, like combining 2 to 3, or even 4 sentences to talk about their day. So, and then at ages 4 to 5, you're getting ready for school. And those speech sounds, the speech should be intelligible. You should be able to understand the child's speech at this point. If you find that you are the only one that understands what your child is saying, or close family members, then that should be concerning to you, because before your child starts school, you would like for them to be able to communicate about any discomfort, their level of safety. And so it's really important that their speech be intelligible to unfamiliar listeners at this point. So that would be another time where you might want to seek help from a specialist, a speech language pathologist.
I appreciate you sharing that, because I'm going back to thinking about my daughter, who at this age, so 2 to 3, 3 to 4, I'm thinking of all the things that weren't happening. 4, we were in preschool, and everyone definitely had challenges understanding what she was saying. We didn't seek help until maybe 9, because I just didn't know. And so I appreciate this information. So again, for those of you who are listening or who are listening on the replay, I wish I would have had this. Like, I knew something was wrong, but I didn't exactly know what to say at the, the primary care visit and things of that nature. And no one even asked me those questions to guide me towards getting help for her early. So thank you for sharing these markers for us, so that those who are listening can seek support early, way before I did, because I sought support when she started noticing something was wrong, especially between her and her peers.
Right.
So this is huge what you're sharing right now. And if you have questions, make sure you drop those questions in, because we want to make sure that your personal question gets answered by Angela while she's here. And if for some reason you aren't able to drop a question, or I'm not seeing that, you can email me, because I have my phone here, at iewwithmrsbrown@gmail.com. I'll put that in the comments here in a second. Did you want to share any more about 4 to 5, or did you want to go to 5 to 6?
Okay, 4 to 5. Also, I think it's important for you to start working on that personal identification information. Their names, age, mommy, daddy's names, their real names, not mommy, daddy. So, also. And I think at this time, the time concepts come into play. Your child will start, your child will start using words like first, next, and last. If not, that's when you should start introduce those. They should start learning about yesterday, tomorrow. Time concepts are really important. And of course, the ability to follow directions and comprehend should increase. They should be able to understand more complex sentences, longer sentences, and more detailed information. And expressively, same thing. Everything should be progressing. They should be able to tell you short stories. And at this point, they should start working on letters. They should be able to identify letters, know the difference between letters and numbers, and also start becoming familiar with letter sound association, making
Mhm.
sure that they're practicing that the letter B makes a sound B, and that the letter and the sound are two different things. uh, and also you might notice that your child may begin to talk differently to different people. Like they'll show
Mhm.
that they talk differently to a baby than to an adult, or differently to their peers than to mommy and daddy. So that's a social communication thing that you may notice.
Okay.
So moving on to 6 to 7 years old, and I mentioned before the letter sound association. Phonemic awareness is really big at this age. So the letter sound association is important. And then also sound association segmenting sounds. Like they know that the word bug should be g. It has the
Mhm.
three sounds. And so all of that will be important for writing and spelling. Um, and then they should be understanding concepts involving order, which will help them in mathematics. Concepts like few, all, except, those concepts should be coming in ages 6 to 7. And so next we have 8 to 10. 8 to 10 years old, your child should demonstrate good sentence recall memory. If you tell this, like the telephone game, if you tell the child something in a sentence, like for instance, let's see, I want you to go downstairs, or I want you to tell Sally to pick up the blocks. He
Mhm.
should be able to understand that, and he should be able to paraphrase it. That he may not be able to repeat it exactly, but should be able to paraphrase it accurately without requiring, a verbatim uh, repetition. And they begin to understand cause and effect, and should be able to define words. They should
Mhm.
be able to not only give messages, but take messages. They should be able to give someone directions as far as how to do something, how to get somewhere, how to play a game. And then they begin to understand humor. And also, a key thing at this point is that your child needs to empower themselves and learn how to ask for assistance. Encourage your
Mm.
child to not be afraid to say, I need help. Could you wait? I need more time. Those are key, because a lot of times kids don't think they have the power or the right. But early on, I think they need to be encouraged to ask for help, help when needed.
I have a question because I teach writing and grammar classes, and this is about the stage where I start teaching and where I teach the IEW curriculum to students about 8 to 10, third to fifth grade. And so I know that you work with speech. Are there things that we should be aware of when it comes to written communication as well, or is that a different area?
Well, no, written communication and spoken communication are very closely linked.
Hmm.
I think as far as written communication, you look for order, like we were talking about in spoken language. Children should be telling stories at this point, be able to
Hmm.
retell information. You want to look at organization. If the child is having trouble organizing their thoughts in a written form, you want to look
Hmm.
and see how they're doing in spoken language, because nine
Hmm.
times out of 10 it could be that they're having trouble. It is a language issue. Then
Hmm.
I've also found that children that have trouble with writing mechanics, just do not like writing or struggle with spelling, they may be fine with their spoken language. It's just the I guess the pressure and the frustration
Hmm.
with having to write takes the focus off of their organization and content.
You make me think of a question that I want to ask, because the Institute for Excellence in Writing talks about removing complexities for our students so that they can think, so that they can get to their ideas. So I'd love for you to like talk about how to remove that frustration so again that they can write. So if there are things, and I know that's kind of going to be paired with what we were talking about, like what are some things that we can, what interventions can we as parents put in place for the
Mhm.
most common struggles. So I'd love that. And then we have a comment here. I agree with you, Leah Ali Johnson. This is such great information. Thank you. And I appreciate it. And I want to get it to you all earlier than I had it, because I really felt like I sought help too late.
Mhm.
Or not too late, but later than I wish I would have sought help for
Right.
my students who struggled. And I knew something was wrong, but I just didn't know what to do or what steps to take exactly. So, all
Right.
right, let me let you keep going. We're at 8 to 10.
Oh, okay. And in the 8 to 10, you were talking about the written expression. Also,
Mhm,
look for errors with grammar,
mm,
and check to make sure that if it's in their spoken language,
mhm,
it may be fine, but they may not know the written form. Like to know that jumped sounds like t, but it's not written jumped
mhm,
with a T at the end,
mhm,
so they may not know the rule for the written graphing or the rule for the suffix or the inflection that's
mhm,
added at the end of the word. So
mhm.
that I just wanted to say that because that will show up in written expression too. And
Okay.
another thing in written expression is punctuation. If you notice that they are not, well, punctuation, sentence length. If they're writing run-on sentences with no punctuation, that could be an indication of some language issues as well. And so we're wrapping up with the milestones here. We're looking at 11 to 14. Around that age, they should be using spoken and written language for a variety of purposes. They should be using their language not just to communicate wants and needs. They should be able to communicate enjoyment. They should be able to argue, persuade. They should be able to use it for humor. And
Mhm,
essentially, they should be able to communicate on adult levels. And at this time, figurative language, they understand innuendos. They should be able to participate in wordplay. And then at this point, it's very important that we try to introduce good study skills,
mm,
um,
mhm,
teaching a child to look at the text for cues, like the bold print. Really important information is in boxes.
mhm,
Okay. And then organizational skills and following lectures and outlines through note taking. Then also asking relevant questions, encouraging them to ask questions related to the content of the information being presented.
mhm.
Then lastly, we have adolescents and young adults. At this point, it's really important that we think about the emotions coming into play.
Mm,
So they're starting to interpret their emotions and attitudes and their emotions and attitudes and the intentions communicated by others as well,
mhm,
others' facial expressions and
mhm.
body language. So they're starting to not only use their spoken language and listening, they're starting to look at body language and how all of that is, when all of that is integrated, what does that mean?
Right.
They're taking the perspectives of others, and they should be aware of social space zones. They should be aware of proximities, like know that you should not be 5 inches from someone's face when you're just talking about the weather. That there's a appropriate distance for different activities in life. Um, and that there are appropriate reactions for different situations. There's appropriate way to react to affection, and appropriate way to react to disappointment. And they
Mm,
start to compare and contrast different things, and they begin to communicate effectively. And they should be developing competency in both oral and written language at this point. So they
mhm,
should be able to communicate as effectively as your typical, adult. So I
mhm.
hope that gives you an idea of how the language transitions and develops from birth to adulthood.
I really appreciate that breakdown. I don't know about everybody else, but I think even though my students are now at that adolescence to young adult age, walking back, now I'm
Mhm.
just like, oh yeah, now I know I would have done this a little bit differently. I'll get it right from my grandchildren, which I won't have for many, 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 many years. But this
Um,
is so helpful. So thank you for doing that, because I think sometimes, I know, particularly as a homeschool mom, there are so many things that we're doing. There are so many decisions that we're making, and I'm not a speech and language pathologist, so I don't necessarily know all of the indicators. So I think this was really helpful to walk us through, what are those indicators? How do we know when help is needed, or how do we know when to just go ahead and give them some time to develop? So that's really, really helpful. Are there any things we talked about, things we overlook as parents that may indicate a delay? Are there any things that you didn't cover that maybe for us as parents you can share that we overlook as parents that actually might indicate a delay?
well, I did it. Excuse me. I tell you, my throat is just not cooperating with me.
No problem. You want to grab some water?
I'm going to take a sip of
Yeah,
my.
go ahead and get some water. While she is doing that, you all, if you have questions, you can, if you are in a space, Facebook or wherever you're sending messages, certainly send your question in, because I'd love for Angela to be able to answer your individual and specific question. You can also, if for some reason you're not sure how to send a question, you can certainly send your question to IEW with Mrs. Brown at gmail.com. I'd be happy to make sure that Angela hears your question and answers your question live while she's here. Again, if you're just joining in or you joined in late, Angela brings over 3 decades of experience as a speech language pathologist to her company, Empower Speech and Language Services. So she's here for us today. She's here to help us navigate anything we might be experiencing in our homeschools, or just as parents in general, even if you don't homeschool, but you have children and you want to make sure that you're not missing something, or you know what to look for so that they are developing well speech and language wise. This is the time to ask your question to her live, because on the replay, it won't be live. So make sure you ask it here. I want to make sure I get your question answered for you. So we were just talking a little bit about, are there other things? I know you hit on some things while you were walking us through the stages, but is there anything else that comes to mind that we as parents overlook sometimes, but that actually may indicate a delay?
Okay. A lot of time, there are times where I've heard parents say, "Oh, he just doesn't listen," or she is just, being difficult. Well, I think you really might look more closely, because the you have to think about what makes you say that that child is difficult. Are you saying they're difficult because after you give them a direction, they don't do it? Or is there a lag in when you ask them to do something and they, perform the action? So I think as parents, we need to think about the verbiage that we're using when we're speaking. And then sometimes you might realize that your child may not know that concept. Like, put this book on the bottom shelf. Does he know bottom? So so we have to think about when we're asking our children to do certain things, are we sure that they know the vocabulary that you're using in that? And so it may not be a behavior issue. It's more that either they don't understand or they may not recall. So you have to check, do they remember? So you may repeat it. Then even if you repeat it and they're not able to do it, do they understand some things in what you're saying? And if not, then you may need to go ahead and just assist them with that, with the task, and show them, because that's the only way they'll learn. Another thing that I think parents may sometimes overlook, a lot of times I hear parents say, "Well, I thought he was just shy," or "I thought she was just shy. She just didn't talk much." That could be indicator of language delay. They may have difficulty with vocabulary and even forming sentence structures, and just not know how to. I would have to see the child to know where the breakdown occurs. Can they even form sentences that are mature, to express what they want or to talk about something? And then also, if the child is not just shy, do they appear anxious when required to talk? So if a child is appearing anxious, they may have word finding problems. They may even have issues with cluttering, which is related to word finding and thought organization, or even stuttering. If you're starting to notice like some tension, frustration, tension, or pressure in the jaw when they're trying to coordinate everything to talk, that might be an indication that they could be developing a stutter. Um,
Mm,
let's see, another thing, I'm trying to think of the things that parents usually come to me with, and it's like, yeah, that is something. We talked earlier about joint attention, and that was really
mhm,
important because a lot of times when the joint attention is missing and limited verbalization and just not that communicated back and forth, um, uh, first, first things first, a lot of people say, oh, is that autism? It may not be. Sometimes
mhm,
they're just some things that are like uh, idiosyncrasies that may stand out, but may not be an indicator that it is autism, but it could be
mhm,
something that's on the spectrum and could be something associated with some type of neurodiversity. Um, Also, when you might think of when your child is trying to retell a story
mhm.
or is trying to explain something to you and you're having trouble following their line of conversation. They started saying one thing and ended up somewhere else, and you just totally lost what they were talking about and it just wasn't making sense. That's a key indicator too that they're having thought organization difficulty. And you'll usually see that like when a child is approaching, sometimes you see it earlier than middle school. If you start seeing that they have trouble telling you what happened during their day or what happened at an event that you went to and it just didn't make sense and you were there with them and it what they were saying didn't line up with what you saw, then I would be concerned.
Yeah, I'm just like over here, like, yes, all of that happened in my house. Like, I was like, what? And I could make no sense of my daughter who was trying to explain an event or something like that. And so I'm just like, oh, she's doing great now. For those of you who are watching, she's 16 now, but that was definitely a struggle. I also noticed that when we were sitting down having tea and coffee together, I was sharing with you that she started just kind of giggling when someone asked her a question instead of answering the question. And so she kind of would get away with being cute and laughing. But I
Right.
realized it was because she was recognizing that we weren't able to understand her or people weren't able to understand her, but we would respond positively to her laughing or giggling or something like that. And so I was like, okay, that's when I knew. And at that point, we were like 7, 8-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so that's when I knew, yeah, there's something beyond time that
Right.
needs to happen here, right? There's something beyond just time. Yeah.
Yes.
Can you talk to us about some interventions that we can put in place? You talked a little bit about some of them as you were going through the stages, but interventions as parents that we can put in place for the most common struggles. And one thing that comes to mind, I primarily use Institute for Excellence in Writing to teach writing, and one philosophy they have is that you can never help your child too much. So I'd love to hear about interventions and just kind of what you think as a speech and a language pathologist, like your thoughts about that particular idea.
Right. No, I think we are our child's first teacher. So
Mhm,
I mentioned before about that. It's important that face-to-face interaction that comes from you, reading to your child, also using singing and rhythm because that actually has been shown to help memory. And I think when you're dealing with singing and songs, and if you tie a certain something that you want that child to learn to rhythm, they will retain it more than likely
mhm,
because they tie it to that rhythm. And also, that's a good way to work on phonemic awareness too. Is a lot of singing and nursery rhymes, which we don't do a lot of anymore, and just songs in general. Then self-talk. I think as parents, if we when you have very young children, when you're going about your day-to-day routine, if you talk to yourself like, oh, I need to so and so and so and so, oh, now I'm doing this, or now I have to get a knife because I'm cutting the apples, so if you're talking as you go, they're getting that vocabulary, if it's new words. And then if you're talking to yourself or talking as you're completing a process or making something, they're learning the processes too while you're talking. So I know
mhm,
it might sound crazy, but again, you're your child's first teacher. And if they hear you talking and if they hear you going through different processes, they will learn from you as well through listening and watching. Then scaffolding is really important. So when you have a child that is may say a sentence that is really small, like I want book. You say, you want the book. So you change it for them so they hear the desired utterance, so they're hearing that the modification, and you emphasize that new word that you want them to use. Let's see, another thing that language experience activities. I think crafts, science experiments, and cooking are ideal. Those are wonderful. Language experience activities that have to do with anything during activities of daily living, anything that you do in your daily routine. If you can think about the vocabulary that's used in brushing your teeth, and really emphasize that. Or if you're talking about science experiments, you talk about what you might predict would happen, and then what the outcome was. And so you can talk about all the steps along the way as far as what you are going to do, and the observations. And that's a good way to get in cause and effect, and just a whole lot of vocabulary and steps. And so I think that that's wonderful. I love science experiments.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love for you to share. We talked a little bit about just the IEP versus 504. So I know in Ohio, where we're located, those are what students would actually be on to get services in
Right.
school, or even, for Ohio, we have something called a John Peterson Scholarship. So if you homeschool, we can seek services from people like you and other individuals who support those who are using the John Peterson Scholarship. Can you
Mhm.
talk about, all right, I noticed that my child has something happening that is a delay of some sort, and I want to seek support. What are the steps to seeking support? And can you kind of explain the whole IEP versus 504 to
Okay.
us, if that's possible, to help us figure out, all right, what do we do when we identify a challenge?
Okay. Well, first of all, I'll go through quickly the difference between an IEP and a 504. Under the Individuals with Disabilities Act, the purpose of the IEP is to provide a free and appropriate education for a child in the educational institution that's identified with a disability. So the the state, by law, they're required to find and identify and evaluate a child with a disability. So your district, that is a responsibility. So that evaluation is key. So an IEP may include a range of supports and services to meet a child's learning needs once they've been identified. That could be a modified curriculum, special classes, specialized instruction. And usually it's under certain disability categories like speech language, special learning disability, autism, visually impaired, blind, hearing impaired, deaf. Um, let's see,
They have emotional disturbance.
emotional disturbed, multiple disabilities, orthopedically handicapped, other health impaired, emotional, and a traumatic brain injury. So
Mhm.
those are the areas. And after the child is identified, then you would have that plan put into place. The difference between an IEP and a 504 is the 504 usually is, I guess it covers more disabilities, and a lot of times, I hate to say this, but it's almost a consolation to the IEP, because you may have a child that may not meet the requirements for an IEP. And a lot of we'll see that a plan providing the 504 is a plan of providing the accommodations for students to access the general curriculum.
Mhm.
So you're not qualifying for a special placement or modifications to your curriculum. It's accommodations to access the general regular ed curriculum. And the 504 might be combined with a related service, but oftentimes it is not. And oftentimes the 504 can be carried out by a regular educator. And it doesn't always have to be written in writing either. So And I will say that the 504 usually is put in place for students that have a documented physical or mental impairment. And those, like if it impacts their ability to walk, breathe, eat, or sleep, communicate, read, or stand. And for instance, if you have a child that might need preferential seating, or
Mhm.
they get anxious in crowds, they might be able to leave a little earlier. So that's a little different than the IEP.
Mhm.
And as a parent that homeschools, I think that it is very important that if you have a child that you suspect has some special needs, that you do notify your district
Mhm.
and really seek out evaluation to determine if they're eligible for an IEP,
Mhm.
because they're more likely to get the support through the John Peterson Scholarship if they have an IEP. Now, that shouldn't be the reason you seek out the evaluation. You're seeking the evaluation to help your child, and you're seeking
Mhm.
out the evaluation with the hopes that if they were to return to the district, an IEP can be in place where they can their needs can be met. And
Mhm.
the way you would go about that, you would contact your let's see, the special education director in your
Mhm.
district, and then, or that it could be your school psychologist also,
Mhm.
requesting that they conduct a MFE, um, and then clearly state your concerns. And I think at this point, because you're making a case for services, you want to have documented the concerns that you have, even if you have work samples or test results. List some of the modifications that you've tried that didn't work,
Mhm.
and then once you have all that evidence, you've submitted it. I would do that in writing. Okay, they should notify you that, yes, they will, do this through a prior written notice, that they will conduct this evaluation. And then once you get that prior written notice, you have like 60 days from that date, and they should evaluate your child then. And then based on that, you should have the meeting. Uh, you should be notified of a meeting where it be discussed whether your child is eligible for any kind of special education services. And if they find that your child is eligible for special education services, then you meet for an IEP, an individualized educational plan for your child, based on the disability category or the services that that child would need. And you set up together, you come up with the goals and objectives. Now, once that is in place, if your child is eligible for services and an IEP has been written, you can then get support from the Ohio John Peterson Scholarship Program. That is a uh, tax dollars are used to cover the cost of services like uh, services from an intervention specialist, many of your related services like occupational therapy, speech therapy, and physical therapy. So I once you find out that you are going to homeschool your child, you would
Mhm.
look for a provider that has been approved by John Peterson. And you
Mhm.
can do that by going to the ODE website, John Peterson Scholarships, and they list their approved providers there.
Okay, I have a question for you, actually. I can't get the whole thing on the screen, but I'll put the beginning of the question on the screen if I can. And then I'll read the rest.
Mhm.
It says, from age 1 to 3, my son received occupational therapy and speech. I was told he no longer needed assistance in kindergarten. He received one-on-one reading and writing assistance. That was discontinued. I have continued to request for assistance throughout grade levels. He's 12 now and still struggles with writing essays, reports, etc. He gets frustrated and only writes a minimum of 5 sentences. I've decided to homeschool this year. I am aware that delays are present. Can you please provide me with feedback on the best way to make progress in his delays?
Okay, and she is saying that he did receive occupational therapy and speech.
Right.
Uh,
When he's from age
mm,
1 to 3, but now he's 12 and he still struggles. Um, and so that service was discontinued, but he's still struggling, and he's 12 now.
Okay. It's really hard for, without actually knowing
Mhm.
what the child is having difficulty with, it's hard for me to speak on the impact of what his needs are from like a fine motor standpoint and how that may
Mhm.
impact his writing. So, and that is not my area of specialty, but it's unfortunate that I I'm hearing that she's not eligible for any supports, but I feel that even a consult from an occupational therapist is key, and even a
Mhm.
speech therapist to really assess. And I'm sorry I'm not answering the question, but it's really hard for me to speak on that without actually seeing what
Sure.
the deficit areas are. So
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I know when I was seeking support for my one of my children, my son in particular, I had to go get an extra test or extra evaluation done to ensure that we got the support we needed from our school district to have that extra, like it wasn't just me
right,
saying that there are issues, but I had and we were able to I was able to go through my primary care provider who
yes,
was able to provide me with a referral because I was really concerned about having to pay for it because the evaluation was like close to $1,000, and I'm like I don't just have that kind of money laying around for an evaluation to make sure I get the support I need. So, um, because there was a little bit of, concern that I felt like he wasn't going to get what he needed if I wasn't able to substantiate
mhm,
my claim that we were having issues. And so that was one thing I know I needed to do that helped me to give that to the school psychologist to confirm. This
yeah,
outside therapist has confirmed that these are the delays that were identified, and then the school really gave me no resistance at all to making sure that my son was on an IEP and that we were able to access the John Peterson scholarship. My daughter has been different. I felt like a lot of her issues are IEP issues,
mhm,
but she only qualified for a 504. Um, she still, has pardon me. I think the voice throat thing is happening over here too. She still, struggles. She's much better, and the school has provided her support and accommodations around her expressive language delay. But
mhm,
they didn't see it as a IEP. They saw it as 504 level need, and I wasn't sure, like, do I fight for the IEP or do I
mhm.
just accept the 504, or, that was a little bit of a challenge. But at the end of the day, both have received services that have helped them to improve academically. But what would you say to that? Because it's like,
Well, and that was the route that I was really hinting that a parent may
yeah,
need to go, because I know sometimes they can file a complaint with the district and
mhm,
they may think the district will pay. Sometimes they will pay for
mhm,
an outside assessment, but a lot of times they do not. So if you get
mhm,
that outside assessment saying, indicating these deficits or some that the validating your concerns, you can take it to the school district, but keep in mind that they do not have to address that. They do not have to, because you have to understand you're looking at uh, disability areas or concerns from a clinical standpoint. Then when you bring it into an academic setting, it's like, well, how does it impact his ability to access or to perform in the academic, the general curriculum?
mhm,
Then also, they have all these guidelines where it has to be so many standard deviations
mhm,
uh, from the norm in order to be eligible. So we have many
right,
children that have weaknesses in
mhm,
all areas, but they do not qualify for the services in a
mhm,
public school setting. So it doesn't mean they don't have weaknesses, they just are not significant enough to warrant
mhm,
where the district feels that, okay, we will take this child under our umbrella and provide them with an IEP. And a lot of parents, that is very frustrating to a lot of parents. And that
mhm,
is one of the reasons why, in private practice, we're able to work with the children, and it's sad. But if you have the John Peterson Scholarship, it's paid for,
pays
but
for.
you do not really have to adhere to those. kind of guidelines, and that's just the way the law does work as far as eligibility. But that does not mean that a weakness is not present in a certain area.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for addressing that question. We're gonna wrap up because we're at an hour. I don't want to keep you all day. I mean, I could keep you all day because I have so many other questions to
Well,
ask,
I
and
could,
this is such
it's
valuable
up to you.
information. Yeah, but I do want to address kind of that adolescent to adulthood, because I'm in that stage, and I know some listeners have some older students, and like my um one of my children who struggles is 17. That
Okay.
child will be 18, and so I'm always thinking about the transition, right? Like
Oh,
how
yes.
we've been advocating for him. He has been advocating for himself, but he's not an adult yet, and his frontal lobe is not fully developed. But that's a
Right.
whole nother conversation for another day. But how do we help our children advocate for themselves as they enter young adulthood, so that again they learn to make sure they get the needs met that they have when
Right.
we are removed from that particular role as their parent?
Well, I think first of all, it's very important that you teach self-awareness,
Mhm.
um, of what helps and hinders learning. Help them understand. Okay, we realize that this strategy did help us, so help them internalize that too, and then help them practice how to share information and their needs. Empower them, make them feel that it is okay to communicate their needs. Um, and also let them know that politeness can go a long way.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
appropriate ways to address adults that can help. Involve your child in the IEP planning process.
Mhm.
If your child isn't on IEP, through sorting out, have him help you sort out the strengths and weaknesses. You could do that together.
Mhm.
Have them engage in problem solving. Have a discussion even about support staff.
Mhm.
Which support staff provides clear information and which one confuses you and why.
Right.
So he'll have a better understanding of the type of learning or the type of environment that benefits him, or that where
Mhm.
he feels the most successful in.
Yeah.
Um, then you want to make sure that he knows his diagnosis,
Mhm.
okay, and knows the impact of the diagnosis in class, and also socially, and potentially, well, in extracurricular activities, and potentially vocationally, and maybe thinking of his um, disability category or diagnosis, and maybe how it might lend itself to a certain career. Okay, so he can help choose an appropriate career path related to his strengths and weaknesses, and let them know that it's okay to let support staff know the strategies that you found, or maybe the strategies that the staff has tried, like, oh wow, that really worked, I liked when we did that.
Mhm.
Well, that just confuses me. When we do this and this, it just overwhelms me. So he needs to be an active participant in all of that. And in the transition planning for life after graduation, have him assess what his strengths are, what brings him joy, and then
Mhm.
try to look at some options where he could be successful in the future, maybe some things. And then after that, help him with the child, look at ways that they can improve certain skills, so that they can be better suited to go
Mhm.
down a certain career or vocation path. And again, I think it's very important to try and build self-esteem.
Mhm.
Try to highlight, how they are, their strengths, and how they are special, and even you might even highlight people that have similar disabilities or similar weaknesses and strengths, and show them how they've managed to succeed in life. So
That's great. Thank you so much, Angela, for being here with us today, for giving us encouragement and practical tools that we can use to help our own individual children, or if, we're working, like I teach children writing and grammar, and I'm always wanting to make sure that I provide, and I'm knowledgeable of how I can help my students be as successful as they are possibly able to be successful. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Are there any closing comments that you want to share? And where can we find you? I'm actually going to add your website to the stream.
Okay.
Um,
You can find me at empowerspeechandlanguage.com. And all of my contact information is there. If you would like to contact me and just have some questions, I do free 20 to 30-minute consultations the first time. So I am available to talk to anyone that may have questions or concerns about their child. And I work with adults also. So feel free to contact me. I'm all about trying to empower people through improving communication.
Well, thank you so much. Again, I appreciate your time today. I appreciate your encouragement personally and professionally. And I know that the information that you shared will help every single person who watches this who, has a student or a child who struggles with speech and language delay, or who may in the future have a child that they're near to that has that struggle.
And I know we're getting ready to go, but you wanted me to remind you when you asked something about expressive language and some things that you could do to, it was early on. Recording is your best friend.
Recording, got you.
Have when your child is speaking or student is speaking, have them record it, and that way you can dictate it later. Have them proof everything and work on editing everything from grammar to organization. So I still think we don't have tape recorders anymore, but you do have apps where you can.
We have Google Voice. Yeah, we have all kinds of things on this phone.
Yes,
I don't even know about yet.
Devices. Use those devices.
The children know where they are. They can show us where the recording features are. No, I think I appreciate that. And that's one thing that part of the process, the writing process that I teach, involves them making an outline and then having to retell that outline using complete sentences for each line of their keyword outline. So I like the idea and often suggest to students, like, record yourself and listen back to your sentence to make sure it's actually complete and it has all the components of a complete sentence. And it is powerful for them to listen to themselves speaking. All students, but especially students who struggle. That for my child who struggled with expressive language delay was a game that skill was a game changer for her to record herself and to go, one line at a time to retell those details.
Well, I've enjoyed this so much. I unfortunately there are so many things, so many strategies that we could talk about all day when it comes to this area. So sometimes we may have to do this again, just highlighting one specific category.
I think that'd be fantastic because I mean, like you said, this is such a broad topic, and then we have so many individual specific delays that we might be experiencing in our own homeschools and things of that nature. So I would love to have you back again where we just kind of hone in. And then, of course, if you're in Ohio, you all can contact Angela yourselves, again, by going to her website, empowerspeechandlanguageservices.com, right?
Yes.
.com. So that's where you can find Angela if you have a specific student that you'd like to ask her about or receive her support around. So anyhow, thank you so much, everyone. And I will see you next Monday. And thank you so much for being with us. You take good care, Angela. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.